Hello everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. I'll be hosting this evening's show. Up first on the hazardous warning graphic, hazardous weather graphic, we've got the yellow area here in the west. That's areas of wind chill advisories here, especially the windy areas out along the coast, higher elevations, western Brooks Range. That's out until 9 a.m. Saturday morning. For wind chill temperatures as low as 50 degrees below zero and those gusty winds that are occurring up there. And the red area, that's a continuation of the blizzard warning for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. That's out until midnight tonight, or continue through the entire night tonight until not midnight, till 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Along the Arctic coast for winds gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour, gradually diminishing, and wind chills down to about 40 to 50 below zero as well, with reduced visibilities down to a quarter mile, or even sometimes just whiteout conditions up there. Again, but that'll all be gradually improving overnight tonight, especially after midnight on toward the AM hours, or around 6 a.m. Winter storm warning now out for the eastern Brooks Range zones right through here, and that's out until also for the night tonight, and then conditions gradually improving after midnight on toward morning, and then throughout the day tomorrow. Moving on to satellite imagery, you can see clouds up here with the system there and the blizzard conditions along the eastern Arctic coast extending southward. Have a trough extending southwest all the way to Togiak Bay, or just northwest of Togiak Bay in the Kilbrook Mountains there, clearing behind it up in here over the Bering Sea. Much drier and, as a result, colder air, especially back up here over the northwest interior into the Chukchi Sea areas well below zero into the afternoon. And the band of clouds right through here with some areas of light snow with it. Otherwise, a lot of disorganized clouds here over the southeast interior. A few isolated rain and snow showers along the North Gulf Coast. Not a bad day in the Panhandle here. Had a little bit of moisture up over the northern areas earlier today, breaking out to some sunshine down to the south. And a not so impressive frontal boundary out here south of Kodiak Island, well southwest of the Panhandle. Slowly trying to make a move mostly off to the east there, while out in the west, areas of clearing, big area high pressure here over the northern Bering Sea up into the Russian Far East, and actually ridging southward there with pretty good conditions in toward Adak, and snow showers though, some chillier air coming out of the interior, over wider trajectory, picking up moisture, clouds, and then snow showers in the Pribilofs there right on the edge of the action, and that extends all the way down and then enhances in the upslope areas of the eastern Aleutians, especially along the Alaska Peninsula. And the next system just coming onto the edge of the chart there, really not moving too fast, with this afternoon starting to pick the winds up out of the east-southeast over the far western Aleutians. Otherwise, the break here in the central areas, very isolated snow showers become a little more numerous here as you head east and get along and north of the Alaska Peninsula, drying back out again, and then cold, breezy conditions southwest interior, and the areas of blowing snow here, especially on the eastern Arctic coast, extending down into the eastern Brooks Range. Wind chill advisories back to the west, and a narrow band of light snow up here, mostly from roughly the White Mountains, central Tanana Valley, up to the eastern Arctic coast there, and then really just a weak trailing edge here, bringing a few light snow showers, the Kuskokwim Valley area, especially along the Alaska Range. Isolated rain and snow showers here for the North Gulf Coast, mostly offshore everywhere. I didn't see anything reported Yakutat, Cordova, or Seward, as well as Sedovia. Clearing out there, Kodiak Island, and not too bad here. Just a few scattered showers this afternoon over the northern southeast coast. And for tonight, that'll continue dry there, but look for an increase in the rain late tonight and in toward morning. Rain and snow mix down here over the southern areas, possibly. Not a sure thing. Front moving in close enough there, and the snow showers will remain off the coast here for the northern Gulf of Alaska. This trough slowing down, really not making a big push off to the east or to the south, but areas of light snow from the Alaska Range across the eastern Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, northward to the Arctic coast. Again, those conditions improving and winds diminishing, but the winter storm warning and blizzard warning out at least through tonight. But you can see markedly better conditions just back to the west here. Good break. Cold temperatures well below zero into the minus 30s for sure here over the western and northwest interior and in the colder zones. And no change here with the Alaska Peninsula. Still looking at IFR with snow along the Bering Sea side. better conditions to the south, big high pressure controlling the northern Bering Sea and keeping most of this action out to the west there. That front pressing up, bringing an increase in the winds, a better chance of some moisture tonight, late tonight for the western Aleutians. And we'll see that advances just a little bit farther up to the northeast here with that tight pressure gradient and rain and snow, possibly spreading as far east as Adak. Definitely not reaching Atka. Really nice conditions out here over the Bering Sea otherwise, with not too bad on the wind, still northeast, a little cooler conditions over the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, definitely drier because they still have some lingering snow showers there along the Bering Sea side of the peninsula and even the Fox Islands. Another trough brings an area of light snow into the Bering Strait area, Seward Peninsula back to St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise clear and cold here over the interior and snowier and a little milder as a result with the clouds here for snow showers from the North Gulf Coast as that trough gradually moves eastward slowly. Still a pretty good chance of snow here in these, but a lot better conditions on the eastern Arctic coast as well as the Brooks Range, and moisture trying to push its way northward here across the southern southeast coast, pushing into the central areas at least, just a chance of showers up to the north. And then for Sunday, second day of the weekend, shaping up like this, so that front finally does make it to the north. So wet conditions, rain or snow here depending on your elevation and latitude over the northern panhandle, breaking out the showers down to the south. Showers mostly offshore again for the North Gulf Coast. And that'll extend back across Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula. Windy conditions on the increase here for the Alaska Range areas all the way around, and to a lesser extent for the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, clear and cold weekend coming up for much of the interior Alaska, out west front weakening, and really not making much eastward progress. Lows for tonight, again, anywhere from 15 to 25 to near 30 below zero in the west and northwest interior. Milder with the clouds in the east here, but still a shade below zero, 5 to 10 below. 20s to near 30 for the panhandle. Highs for tomorrow. Below zero, much of the interior, lower to mid 30s to lower 40s for the panhandle, lower 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. Lows Sunday morning, even colder here, 35 to 40 below in some areas of the interior, well below zero the Arctic coast, 20s for the panhandle, and south central Alaska coming down as well, down in the single numbers. Some areas could fall as low as 10 to 15 below, especially say up the Susitna Valley around Willow and those areas of Trapper Creek, 15 to 20 below for the Copper River Basin, lower 30s for the Aleutians, and then highs in the afternoon staying about 5 below for the Copper River Basin, lower teens, south central Alaska, well below zero over the interior areas, and 30 to 35 for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Our first flying weather graphic here shows pretty good area of IFR over the eastern interior, from about the Alaska Range area on the north side up there to the eastern Brooks Range, breaking out the good VFR here from the central western Arctic coast all the way down into northern Bristol Bay across the interior, and then eastward here across Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, and then you pick up some marginal VFR for the Kenai Peninsula across Turnagain Arm roughly into the Talkeetnas, and then the central Tanana Valley. Marginal VFR in areas here from the Bering Strait down to Nunivak Island, just north of the Pribilofs. VFR, this part of the Bering Sea, then a band of IFR farther out to the west in the Aleutians, and some marginal VFR mostly over the central and southern southeast coast. Tomorrow, or for Sunday morning, we've got marginal VFR here over the eastern Brooks Range area, southward to some IFR over the central Tanana Valley, more or less, and then from about Nenana southward, you get into some marginal VFR. Again, down across, say, the Denali Highway, Talkeetna Mountains into Prince William Sound. Good VFR in much drier air back out to the west, and also from the Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast into the central Panhandle. Still some lingering marginal VFR down south, and a swath up here over the eastern Bering Sea to St. Lawrence Island, and then that band of IFR hanging out over the western Aleutians. And for Sunday afternoon, that dissipates and slips a little bit to the east there. So staying out over Kiska and Chitka Islands, that leaves Adak and Atka in the marginal area, a more narrow zone of VFR, marginal for the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, VFR central Arctic coast southward into the southwest interior. Bristol Bay, marginal, Kodiak, marginal, North Gulf Coast, Gulf of Alaska, marginal VFR, and that extends on in to the Panhandle, IFR up here over the extreme northeast interior. And for Anatuvik, VFR tomorrow, but Adigan may start out marginal early and then become VFR later in the morning. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR throughout the entire day. Rainy though, possibly starting out marginal early and then becoming VFR mid to late morning hours, definitely. And that'll take a little longer for windy, starting out marginal and may not become VFR till possibly into the afternoon. And for Isabel, IFR maybe becoming or trending toward marginal. And Mentasta, though, kind of a pessimistic forecast here. I'll leave it IFR through the entire day. And then for Tanita, marginal VFR, possibly becoming VFR there on the eastern entrance. And Portage, marginal VFR trending toward VFR into the afternoon and evening. And then Chilkoot and White, both VFR. Freezing levels tomorrow morning, 2,000 feet south of the Aleutians at the surface here, south of the Pribilofs across the Falls Pass area. Just east of Kodiak, North Gulf Coast, back down across the Panhandle, we got up to 4,000 feet in the southern southeast coast. And then with that could be some areas of light rime icing scattered around the southern Panhandle there. Nothing all that significant. And then also up here over the eastern interior from the northeast, across 40-mile country up to maybe the Yukon Flats, another batch out here over the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, and yet more extensive area with probably that's where most of the moderate would be, if there's any at all, would be out over the western Aleutians. Jet stream, good upper level ridge here over the Bering Sea, central Bering, Russian coast there. Cold northwest flow coming down, just 50 to 70 knots though, but an extended trough into the Gulf of Alaska, return flow 30 to 40 coming around that lingering ridge over northwest Canada. And at 9,000 feet, pretty good winds at this elevation across the western interior, looking 35 to 45 knots here from the northwest coast right down into Bristol Bay, diminishing as they cross the Alaska Peninsula. A narrow trough here through the central interior, right into the Kenai Peninsula area. Pretty light winds associated with that on either side, except much brisker on the west side than on the east side. And then this system down here could kick the winds up to 40 knots on the south coast of the Panhandle, and then 30 to 45 knots there, western central Aleutians, western Bering. Same pattern, 3,000 feet, big ridge here over the eastern Bering Sea in the north, with the 45 to 55 knot winds on the west side and 35 knot winds on the south coast of the Panhandle, 25 to 40 here over the western interior. And with that, quite an area of moderate chop expected from Noatak Valley, Kivalina, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, southward across the Selawik Valley, much of the western interior down to the Alaska Range, Bristol Bay area. And light to isolated moderate chop, eastern, or the Talkeetnas, Wrangell Mountains down into the Panhandle, where it becomes moderate down to the south. Also look for some moderate turbulence out over the Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Remember, the easiest way to avoid being lost is to update your position on a chart. Don't rely on only one instrument. Use your VOR receivers. Note the time at checkpoints. Note the difference between forecast and actual winds. Use your eyes to check for landmarks. Practice pilotage. If you do lose positional awareness, follow simple procedures. Check your fuel. If you're in a fuel critical state, call for help. Call ATC or 121.5, the emergency frequency, for assistance. If you're not in a fuel critical state, determine your last known position. Calculate how far you've traveled and in what direction. Gain altitude if possible for better reception of nav aids and a better look at the ground. Use your VORs and NDB. Once you've reestablished your position, make sure you still have enough fuel to reach your destination. If not, look for a suitable alternate and head for it. Congratulations! You kept your head, reestablished your position, and found the airport. Time to pat yourself on the back? Maybe not. Finding an airport doesn't always spell the end of an aviator's problems. You still have to get the airplane on the ground safely.
734 Zulu Sierra, York advises runway 34, wind 280 at 18, gusting to 22, no reported traffic.
Sounds like you've got a gusty crosswind to deal with. Dealing with crosswinds is one of a pilot's greatest challenges, no matter how much experience he or she has. And the same conditions that can blow you off course can create problems in getting your plane on the ground if the wind is not aligned with the runway. Remember your training. Your instructor emphasized the importance of making a stabilized approach, using power and flap settings to make a smooth descent, without having to constantly readjust the throttle. That's especially difficult in a crosswind. No two crosswind landings are alike, and they're handled differently in a stiff and steady wind as opposed to a gusty one. So why not make a rule to stay on the ground on days with strong winds? Two reasons. First, handling crosswinds is a basic flight skill that every PIC needs to be able to cope with. Second, forecasts can be wrong. Conditions can change more rapidly than anticipated. Therefore, you must be prepared to make crosswind landings. Air Safety Foundation research of NTSB accident reports found many cases of airplanes being blown off the side of the runway during rollout, with strong winds cited as a contributing factor. Indeed, 30% of all accidents occur in takeoff and landing phase. These accidents exhibit seasonal fluctuation as well. Springtime often brings blustery weather, and it follows months when pilots may not have been doing much flying. Aircraft are built to handle crosswinds. The FARs require longitudinal control and stability. An aircraft must be able to handle a minimum crosswind component of 0.2 VSO, or stall speed, in the landing configuration. The typical four-place aircraft found in the rental fleets of most FBOs have a VSO of about 55 knots at gross weight, so they have to be able to handle a crosswind of at least 11 knots. Most have a demonstrated crosswind component of considerably more than that. The maximum demonstrated crosswind component doesn't represent the ultimate crosswind an aircraft can handle safely. It merely indicates the maximum crosswind that was demonstrated for the FAA during certification. But these crosswind capabilities were demonstrated by experienced test pilots who were thoroughly familiar with the aircraft they were flying. So low-time pilots who want to do the same thing could be setting themselves up for an accident. And don't make the mistake of thinking the wind has to be 60 to 90 degrees off the nose to qualify as a crosswind. A 30-degree crosswind angle constitutes 50% of the wind speed. So if you're landing with a 20-knot wind just 30 degrees off your nose, that's the same as landing with a 10-knot wind directly from the side. A 45-degree crosswind component represents 70% of the wind speed, or 14 knots in that same 20-knot wind. Fortunately, most runways are aligned with prevailing winds. Before airports are built, local weather patterns are studied to minimize the possibility of strong crosswinds. But we know weather and winds don't always behave like they're supposed to. That means when strong crosswinds do arise, most pilots haven't had much recent experience in dealing with them. As you learned in flight training, there are two basic ways to compensate for a crosswind: the crab, or angling into the wind, or a side slip, or cross control, lowering the upwind wing into the wind while holding opposite rudder to keep the aircraft from turning in the direction of the lowered wing. A crab may be held until just before landing, but ultimately, the airplane must touch down in a slip. The first step is finding out what the wind conditions are. ATIS and ASOS broadcasts give wind reports, so this is the first place to look for wind information. At non-towered airports without weather broadcasts, a call on the Unicom for advisories on wind conditions should also be made. But the most reliable indicator is, of course, the windsock. But winds can be highly variable. Notice your wind drift and correction angle as you approach the airport and enter the pattern. If it's a windy day, plan on increasing airspeed all around the pattern. An extra 5 knots on downwind, base, and final is a good rule of thumb. If it's gusty, add half the gust speed all around the pattern. Remember that as you slow the airplane, if the wind remains constant, you'll need to increase control displacement to compensate for the aircraft's lower airspeed. If you're crabbing downwind, you'll have to increase the crab angle. Factor the wind into your decision on where to turn final. If the crosswind is going to be from the right on final, you can overshoot the center line so the wind can push you back on course. If it will be coming from the left, roll out early. On final, the rudder can tell you how much control authority you'll have in the crosswind. The less rudder deflection needed to compensate for the aileron deflection, the more control you have. If you run out of rudder, that is, the rudder is fully deflected and you can't hold the nose straight for the amount of aileron applied in a side slip, there is too much crosswind for the aircraft to handle, and it's time to head to an alternate airport. Get a mental picture before you enter the pattern of where the wind is coming from. Remember to compensate for it all around the pattern. The downwind leg gives you a chance to see how actual conditions are affecting the plane. Note how much of a crab angle is required to keep a consistent distance from the runway, just as it would be in a no-wind situation. This is not a set-it-and-forget-it situation. The wind will be different close to the ground, and variable winds may require constant adjustments of the control surfaces. As the approach continues, you'll be slowing down, requiring increased control deflection. Typically, the wind will also be changing. Wind speed tends to decrease near the ground because of friction with the ground. Conversely, topographical features can make winds do unexpected things close to the ground when your aircraft is at its slowest and most vulnerable. For example, parking lots, buildings, or areas cleared of vegetation can give rise to updrafts on a sunny day. Surrounding hills, trees, or other obstacles can create wind shear that adds to challenge on a gusty day. In a strong crosswind or on a gusty day, using less flaps increases the touchdown speed and may increase control. For this reason, many manufacturers recommend reduced flap angles in strong crosswinds.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis done today, Friday. Shows Bering Strait closed off, and we've got ice now down to and south of St. Lawrence Island, and gradual expansion westward here along the coast, especially from Nunavik Island northward. And that's expected to continue with the cold temperatures below zero. Will be continued ice growth across the northern Bering Sea. And for the coastal water forecast for tomorrow, we've got east winds up to 30 knots on the south coast, otherwise 20 knots for the central and north side, coming even down to 15 knots there toward Yakutat. Northern Link Canal, increasing those winds, northerlies 30 knots sustained, gusts 45 knots, sea 6 feet. North winds 20 for Stevens Passage, and Clarence Strait winds out of the east at 20 with 4-foot seas. And the outlook for Sunday, lighter winds now on the south coast, southeast becoming east, but only at 15 knots, seas though 10 to 12 feet. And then we've got east winds at 20 knots for the north coast with 9-foot seas. Lose the gusts there, lose the gale force gusts for Northern Link Canal, but still sustained at 30 knots. Small craft advisories for Stevens Passage. Light southeast winds for Clarence Strait. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, north 15 with gusts of 25 out of the northern bays there. And northeast 15 with gusts of 40 knots here for the eastern North Gulf Coast and out of the Copper River Delta. Otherwise north 15, but gusts 25 there for the western North Gulf Coast. Then sustained 30 for the Barren Islands. And minimum gales for Kachemak Bay, northwest 35, seas 10 feet, northeast 20, southern Cook Inlet, and just 10 knots, northern Cook Inlet. Then the outlook for Sunday, no change for northern Cook Inlet, northerlies at about 25 here for the areas south of the Forelands. And pick the gales up a little now, 40 knots out of the northwest there for Kachemak Bay, north 35 for the Barren Islands, but markedly less here, just northeast 15 for the North Gulf Coast. East side, though, up to about 20 knots, seas 4 to 5 feet. Northeast 15 for Prince William Sound with 3-foot seas. Kodiak Island, north 25 tomorrow, 10-foot seas. Shelikof Strait, northwest at 30 with 6-foot seas. And then stronger winds here, Sitkinak to all the way to Cape Sarachev. North winds 40 knots, gusts to 55 knots, sustained. Lighter there on the Bering Sea side. North 30 here for the Alaska Peninsula with 14-foot seas, 7-foot seas, but still winds north of 30 there for Bristol Bay. And then for Sunday, not much change here, north 30, 8-foot seas for Bristol Bay. We've got now gales out of the north, 35 knots here for the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape, northwest 35, seas 13 feet. And then 40-knot winds from Castle Cape up to Sitkinak. 30-knot winds blow out of the northwest across Kodiak Island. And for the Fox Islands, north to northeast or east northeast to north, 25 to 30 knots there. Strongest for Unalaska Island, seas 13 feet. Easterlies at 30 knots, Adak and Atka. And then out toward that next front, tight gradients, so 40 to 45 knot winds coming into the picture out there tomorrow. Those fall back to south 30 there as that front lifts northward. The western Aleutians, 35-knot winds here west of Adak to about Kiska, and then down to 30 out of the east-southeast for Atka and Adak. And then we're looking at small craft advisories here for the eastern Aleutians for 20 to 30-knot winds and seas running 8 to 13 feet. Southwest coast, strongest wind south of Nunivak Island, gale force, north 35, seas 9 feet, Pribilofs, northeast at 25 with 10-foot seas. 15-knot winds there, St. Matthew Island, north of Nunivak Island, west 21st St. Lawrence Island. And then for the outlook for Sunday, north 15, St. Lawrence Island, gradually increase here as you come down the coastline, 20 knots north of the island. Gales south of Nunivak Island there, north 35 knots, 20-knot winds to the Pribilofs on up into the northern Bering Sea. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, looking for a gradual diminishing of the winds up there, but still brisk wind advisories through the afternoon tomorrow, 25 knots, 20-knot winds central and west side, Cape Beaufort on down to the Strait, winds will be 15 knots. And then on Sunday, northwest 15 to 20 knots here from the Bering Strait right up to Cape Beaufort, west side of the coast there, western coast west 15, pretty light now for the central and east side, just down to 10 knots. Outlook again tonight, blizzard warning continues all night tonight with winter storm warning or for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, winter storm warning for the eastern and northeast Brooks Range there, blowing snow, visibility is reduced to near zero at times and wind chills to 50 below, wind chill advisory on the west coast there. Western Arctic coast continues through most of tonight and then gradually diminishing, clearing colder light snow with this system here, and then some rain makes an appearance here over the southern panhandle to the south there, and this area of moisture gradually moving eastward, followed in by colder, drier air on Sunday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.